provide security, but you've got to get the weapons out of the hands of Hamas first. The White House has struck a deal. White House officials, negotiators have struck a deal with Hamas. They think, again, for people just tuning in, they think they've gotten Hamas to decommission, to give up their weapons and provide the locations of all the tunnels they've been building through the years. If, in fact, that happens, then that meets the requirement that Arab nations have been saying for quite some time and have been saying to me for the past several years, for them to come in and be that police force to make sure that Gazans can live and rebuild in peace.
Right. And of course, Hamas, not to be trusted. I mean, them actually, I think there's a lot of skepticism. Not to be trusted, Hamas. I think we can all agree on that. So there'll be real skepticism that they actually will disarm. But if they are signaling that they will do this, even if it takes a while, that is a significant step. It would allow these Arab nations to buy in. And to what Vaughn said earlier, if this almost quasi two-state solution, if this actually comes to be, or if it looks like it's heading down that path, well, is that enough for, say, Saudi Arabia to say, well, okay, now maybe we can start thinking about normalizing relations with Israel, which has been a huge goal in that region because we're seeing progress there in Gaza? We don't know. That's well down the road. But, and inherently, this is all very fragile. We, of course, will be staying on this and reporting it. Joe's bringing us this great reporting this morning. Shifting to another conflict zone, Frank Foer, wanted to get a reaction to some of my reporting with a couple of our fellow Atlantic writers, an exclusive about what Volodymyr Zelensky asked President Trump in the White House this week. Zelensky told Trump that basically Ukraine's best option to survive this winter, because Russia, though the battlefield is a frozen conflict, Russia is still pummeling Ukrainian cities, that he's like, we need the ability to hit within Russia, missile sites, these small, sometimes mobile missile sites, take them out. In order to do that with our drones, we need access to Starlink, Elon Musk's Starlink. And to this point, Musk has declined to offer them that. And therefore, Ukraine would not be able to hit these sites with much effectiveness. So Zelensky asked Trump to ask Musk. Trump said he would, but was very non-committal as to whether he would actually support this plan or not. We report, we know Trump just wants to bring this war to an end. If he thinks Ukraine can hit these Russian sites and, bring Putin to the table, then he might support it. But if he thinks it's going to just prolong or escalate the conflict, then he won't, and Zelensky's plan would be cast aside.
I mean, it's so striking that there's been this revolution, at least in terms of the vibe and the weather, between Zelensky and Donald Trump over the course of the last year, where Zelensky has wisely played himself back into the game. And yet, for all the ways in which Zelensky has made headway with Trump and that the mood music is so much better, it's still not yielding the dramatic leap in assistance that would help Ukraine achieve these objectives. I mean, this is a relatively, I would think that at least making an affirmative, very heavy ask of Elon Musk in this situation it costs him almost nothing, and I don't think it's going to derail any sort of diplomatic initiative that he has, because that diplomacy has yielded nothing. The only way for this war to end is for Ukraine to really get the upper hand and strike Russia within Russia in an aggressive enough way to bring them to the table. And if this is what he needs, it's not the same as having to give him scarce air defenses. This is something that Musk could provide relatively cost-free.
Yeah, no, Frank framed this exactly the right way. This is the Ukrainians had that exact thought. They figured this is a small ask, Vaughn. Like, it's a small thing to ask Trump to lean on Musk, or perhaps to give them access through a Pentagon-esque Starlink system. They're not seen as quite as effective there in Russia. And again, warmer rhetoric between Trump and Zelensky. Zelensky's learned how to play Trump a little better. Trump's drawn to winners. Ukraine has momentum, all that. But we've seen a decade now that when at decision time, Trump's instinct is always defer to Putin.
And we have seen even just last week when it was suggested that Zelensky was going to bring intelligence showing that Russia had helped Iran in striking U.S. military assets in the Middle East. He said that he was going to ask Vladimir Putin about it. Right. So he still defers to him. And inside of his own director of national intelligence is suggesting he's firing own intelligence officers at the exact same time. I think it's important when we're talking about Elon Musk, too, kind of like in the Laura Loomer framework, both of them have very similar views that they publicly expressed about Ukraine. And it was just, I believe it was this last winter, that he posted an image of the Nazi flag and the EU flag essentially merging together. And he said it was the Fourth Reich. So that's the type of man that you're trying to convince to aid the Ukrainian effort. That was less than a half a year ago. I mean, we saw Laura Loomer take a wild 180. So what's to say that Elon Musk couldn't as well, especially if you believe that there's potential investment opportunities that make it more beneficial, if you believe that maybe Ukraine actually has a shot at winning this war against Russia and they're the better investment? I think that's a question that Elon Musk will have to answer.
It is fascinating to hear the president sort of be described as this spectator, Joe and Mika, when he is also the most powerful person in the world who has the ability to, of course, decide who actually might win the thing that he is spectating. But again, I think about this politically. What Vaughn was just saying is the notion of there is this larger ideological movement in Trump's base around Western civilization. And so how does Putin fit into that now? And how does it feel to watch this whole thing sort of be paradoxical and contradictory to the point of perhaps its own weight leading it to collapse here in America as a political cause?
I've always thought it was absolutely inexplicable that the same people that ran around carping about saving Western civilization because some left-wing freak professor at some weird college somewhere said something bizarre in class, and they're saying Western civilization, we got to save Western civilization, and yet they are on the side of the East, invading the West. They're on the side of a former KGB agent who has invaded Ukraine, who is desperately trying to break away from their Eastern oppressors and become a full-blown member of Western civilization. And now you have Poland, really our best ally on the front. Now you have Poland at risk of being invaded by Putin and those concerns out there. How exactly do you support Western civilization and Vladimir Putin at the same time? How do you support Western civilization and help somebody who is desperately trying to push back on the expansion of Western civilization and is killing people in apartment buildings and is kidnapping thousands and thousands of children, all because Ukrainians want to be free, all because Ukrainians want to be a part of the West, all because they want to have what we've had for so long, Western liberal democracy, and that's liberal with a small L. Mm-hmm. That's having freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all the freedoms that we have, all the freedoms that Europeans have, all the freedoms that the West have. They want free markets. Vladimir Putin doesn't. So, great question by Pablo. You can't be for Western civilization and stand by neutrally and stand by quietly and sit on your hands if you're not helping the Ukrainian cause. It's that simple, and you know it. And you're lying to yourself, and you're on the take from Russia if you don't admit that.
MS Now
this is clear. This is clear as Western Germany's fight from 1945 to 1989.
MS Now contributor Pablo Torre, thank you. And MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard and staff writer at The Atlantic, Frank Forth, thank you both as well. And still ahead on Morning Joe, democratic socialism is on the rise across the country, and it's creating growing concerns within the party establishment. We'll get a live report from Chicago, where the Democratic Socialists of America will kick off a conference today. Plus, a look at what's on the Morning Joe bookshelf this week. Our friend Ryan Holiday will tell us about the memoirs more people should know about. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
We love the Ferris wheel. Sometimes TJ will pay him an extra $5 to stop it when we're at the top, just so we can take in the entire scene.
He also won't leave until you get him a stuffed animal.
I know. What was the last stuffed animal I got him?
It was a minion.
He loves Minions, right?
I know.
He loves Minions. Well, anyway, from Coney Island, from my special time, Coney Island, to that time of the week where we look at what's on the Morning Joe reading list. And let's bring in right now a guy I've never been on a Ferris wheel with at Coney Island.
We got to get through
but
this.
we got to do it. New York Times bestselling author Ryan Holiday. Ryan, he hosts a top-ranked podcast, The Daily Stoic.
It's so good.
It is fantastic. He gets about 5 million downloads per month, and he's also the owner of The Painted Porch, an independent bookstore in Texas, where he regularly shares his reading recommendations with more than 1 million of his followers on social media. And Mika and I got to get out there. We got to get out there.
Ryan, your theme this week, memoirs more people should know about. Let's go through them.
I want to start with Asylum by William Seabrook. What's so remarkable about this? Written in 1935, and this guy details what it's like going through rehab at a time when to say the crude techniques to take care of that. But you point out there are a lot of things that he mentions in this book that are now being used by people in rehab facilities.
Yeah, in 1933, William Seabrook is probably the most famous journalist in America, one of the most famous travel writers of all time. He's also a hopeless alcoholic. But because there's no 12-step, there's no rehab, there's no recovery, he checks himself into an insane asylum. And I think the result is this kind of inner travel book, right? He's exploring himself, he's exploring his demons, and it is a remarkable book. Not enough people know about it. You can see my copy here is very, very old. I have a Bantam Classics paperback from the 60s, and it's back in print now, but this is one of the most incredible memoirs you will ever read from a writer more people should know about. He's actually the one who popularizes the word zombie in the American language. He brings that back from his travels. So, crazy book.
Oh, wow. All right. What about Toto Chan? That's an autobiographical memoir. It's Friday about a lively, hyperactive young girl who's in World War II Japan. Tell us about it.
You would not know, but this book has the Guinness World Record for the most copies sold of a memoir. It sold over 25 million copies. Incredibly popular in Japan, where she is, Toto-chan is their Oprah. But as a little girl, she was what we would today call neurodivergent. She can't sit still. She doesn't like to pay attention. She doesn't know what to do with herself. She's actually expelled from her first school at 6 years old. But then she meets this school principal who is unlike any educator you've ever met. It's the power of the right teacher to the right kid at the right time. And it's just this incredibly sweet book that I think every parent should read, every teacher should read. And it is beyond lovely. You will love this book, I promise.
Okay, let's get to Death Be Not Proud by John Gunther. Tell us about it.
Another very famous American journalist. At 16 years old, he finds out his son has terminal brain cancer. And this kid is incredible. He was on his way to Harvard. And here he is staring down death. I can't promise this book won't make you cry. It is haunting and moving. The afterword is written by the boy's mother. She has this line I think about all the time with my kids. She says, reflecting on the loss of her son, she says, "The only thing I wish we'd done differently is I wish we'd loved him even more." And this is a haunting, beautiful book every parent should read.
Wow. Tell us about your next selection, Hollywood Park. It's about the frontman of an indie rock band, and it's a bestseller. And it talks about
New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, it talks about his traumatic childhood, his escape from an infamous cult, and his journey to healing through education and music. Just an incredible story.
Yeah, the Airborne Toxic Event, a great indie band. You've almost certainly heard their song sometime around midnight on the radio over the last decade or so, but you're probably not thinking, I want to read the frontman's memoir, but I assure you that you do. He was raised in a cult, a notorious cult called Synanon, where kids were separated from their parents. He spends the first 5 years of his life not knowing who his parents are. And then when his mother finally breaks from the cult and rescues him, his life doesn't get better, actually gets worse. She has mental health problems. He has a number of terrible stepfathers. It is a hard life until his own father, was also in the cult, comes back, himself a drug addict, himself in and out of jail, but he comes back, gets his life together, and helps his son become their first member of their family to go to college. He actually gets a scholarship to Stanford, and then becomes this great musician. It is a moving, powerful book. And this guy's not just playing as a writer. You know, sometimes celebrities or musicians do these memoirs. This is a real book by a fantastic writer. And again, I love memoirs when they give you a glimpse into somebody's life that you didn't know you'd be interested in, but you find yourself just absolutely enthralled.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this next book is a bit of a surprise for me. I guess I had a historical blind spot here. Fishing for Fun by Herbert Hoover. And it's this charming 1963 collection of essays and speeches. And Herbert Hoover, the ultimate hard-ass conservative, ends up being a conservationist. Tell us about it.
Yeah, you didn't think I'd have a memoir from Herbert Hoover on this list, did you? But he did. He wrote this lovely book. He wrote this lovely book about fishing. It's sort of meditations on a craft. The Colorado River's at record highs right now. I took my kids fishing down the river behind the bookstore last week. And it is, the subtitle of this book is great, right? It's Fishing for Fun and How to Wash Your Soul, which is what fishing is. It's quiet, it's outdoors, it's lovely. And yeah, it has that magical effect. It turns him into an environmentalist, a conservationist. I think this is a lovely book. I love memoirs from people you didn't think you'd want to read about, from perspectives you hadn't considered.
Sticking to the theme of fish, Why Fish Don't Exist by Lulu Miller. Tell us about it.
I don't think I've read anything like this book ever in my life. Lulu Miller is a science reporter. She set out to write a book on this taxonomist, this guy who's obsessed with categorizing every fish that ever lived. And somehow it turns into this memoir about her life falling apart, her trying to make sense of the chaotic categorization of her own life. And I guess the main question you're probably asking is, what do you mean fish don't exist? What does that mean? Well, scientists have since decided, taxonomists have decided, that fish are not actually a category. Just because they all live in the water doesn't mean they're all the same species, just like all the animals that live on a mountain are not their own species. And so fish as a category don't exist. Crazy title, but ultimately a jumping off point for a lovely, incisive, vulnerable memoir from again, a person you didn't think you'd want to read a memoir from, but I promise you do.
And then finally, Black Like Me by John Howard Griffin. This is, of course, the 1961 nonfiction book by a white journalist who darkened his skin in 1959 to go through the segregated Deep South so he could document daily racism, hostility, and harsh realities that were faced by African Americans under Jim Crow laws. Tell us about it.
Yeah, this book sold 10 million copies when it came out in 1961. I guess it's not technically a memoir. I'd call it more like an early stab at gonzo journalism. Talk about a guy you'd want to read a memoir from. He fights in the French Resistance. He serves in the Pacific in World War II, temporarily goes blind, loses his sight for 10 years, it comes back, and then, undergoes this incredible experiment, darkens his skin, and he travels through Arkansas and Texas and Louisiana and Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia as a black man. And, did you lose me?
We got you.
You keep going. You keep going.
Okay. And then travels through the South, as a black man, and documents what segregation looks like at the time, and is one of our vivid historical documents as to what segregation was actually like, which, spoiler alert, was horrible and even worse than people are trying to rewrite it as today.
All right.
Ryan Holiday, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan.
Check out The Daily Stoic anywhere you get your podcasts and visit thepaintedporch.com for more information. Coming up, we're going to go through new polling showing Democrat James Tallarico leading Republicans.
Todd Blanche is negotiating in good faith, but it's clear that the approval to get this done is above his pay grade, and we just need to get to that pay grade. I don't believe it's the president.
Who is it? Who is it, though?
I don't operate that way. Right now, I hope y'all never know who it is. But if we don't get it solved, you will.
I mean, we've heard from them. It's just that they refused to commit to writing what he testified to under oath. And it's not a big ask. We're trying to help them get this solved, but they refused to accept our help.
The two Republican senators who are holding up Todd Blanche's nomination for Attorney General continue to stand firm on their demands from the Department of Justice. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Friday, July 31st. We begin with President Trump now suggesting that he may temporarily withdraw Blanche's nomination. The president posting on social media that he's essentially willing to wait until Republican Senators John Cornyn and Thom Tillis are out of office next year. Cornyn and Tillis have said they will not vote to advance Blanche's nomination over the president's lawsuit settlement with the IRS giving Trump and his family tax audit immunity, as well, here we go, as well as the $1.776 billion.
That's Jonathan Lemire. Donald Trump is saying, I will throw my Attorney General nominee overboard if my family and I can't get immunity from the IRS, the likes of which nobody else in America has. So what he's saying is, we want to live, the Trump family wants to live by separate rules regarding the IRS than any other family in America, any other family on the planet. And he's willing to not have an acting attorney general, active attorney general, to do that. I mean, this is something, by the way, that's not just unpopular with Democrats, this is unpopular with Republicans.
Yeah, and when this deal was first announced some weeks back, it was the weaponization fund that got most of the attention. And look, that's outrageous, too, the fact that January 6th felons may benefit from this. But it's interesting in recent weeks, on the Hill anyway, Republicans are more upset about this IRS component of it, because for exactly what you just said, it's an Trump exceptionalism, and no one else would benefit from this. This is an unprecedented fashion. And look, Trump is obviously upset. It's very clear. He's made clear what his priorities are. He prioritizes the fund and the IRS protections over installing Todd Blanche as permanent attorney general. Now, yes, look, Blanche can stay in the acting role for a while, so maybe in the short term it's not that big of a deal. Trump floating there that he could just renominate Blanche, after January when Cornyn and Tillis are no longer there. But the problem with that plan, of course, is we have no idea what the Senate's going to look like come January. The Republicans may have a smaller margin or perhaps be in the minority. And also, reporting I've done on the Hill and others as well, the objections to this deal are not just Cornyn and Tillis. There are other Republican senators who are very anxious about it, too. There's no guarantee that as long as Blanche doesn't put this in writing, as long as he doesn't officially memorialize this will never happen, there's no guarantee he'll get voted in as Attorney General. But right now, of course, the focus is on Tillis and Cornyn. MS Now's Ali Vitale, the host of Way Too Early, caught up with Cornyn yesterday on Capitol Hill.
Have you talked to the president?
No. No.
Would a call from him help?
Yeah, he could fix this in a minute. But I don't know who he's listening to or whether he's motivated to do that. This is about making sure that even if you're the president of the United States, you don't get favorable terms from the government in a settlement of a lawsuit that ordinary citizens would not get, like protection from audits by the IRS into the foreseeable future.
And David Rode, Cornyn himself said that the objections run much deeper in the Republican Party. It's not just limited to Cornyn and Tillis. In fact, there's his tweet right there. POTUS is mistaken if he believes concerns about the provisions in his tax lawsuit settlement are limited to me and Senator Tillis. There have not been many moments where Republicans have been willing to defy President Trump in this term, but they've drawn a line on this one.
And you see a shift, and it's self-dealing, it's corruption, but it's just basic competence. Again, the president chose to back Ken Paxton in Texas, alienating Cornyn. He turned on Thom Tillis, and now they're using their constitutional right to push back from what's unquestionably another corrupt deal. So on so many fronts, the president and his team think they can do whatever they want, and they're going to do it better than anyone has in the past. But on all, we'll talk about the war later and other things, his plans and efforts are just failing.
Yeah, Mark Caputo. I mean, this is, as David said, this is self-dealing. This is corruption. This is also something I've never seen in my life. This is one politician saying, my family and I are going to get protected status, are going to get immunity from IRS audits now and in the future, just because we want them. And and along with that was also the fund where they were going to pay people who beat the shit out of cops on January the 6th. Good luck getting that through as well. But taken together, this is just another example of one of these things that are just so toxic politically for Republicans that they can't even believe they're having to deal with this a couple of months before a midterm.
Right, and what they're seeing, what you're really hearing out of the Republican Senate is that the president and what you're hearing out of the White House is they have just sort of a broken relationship. Setting this aside, which is sort of a major issue, right? The president just keeps insisting that the Senate scrap the filibuster. They won't do it, and that makes him angry. He insists they pass this SAVE Act concerning voter fraud and voter ID, and they won't do that, and that makes him more angry. And the Senate and Congress, more generally, wanted the government to release all of the Epstein files, and it now appears that there are a number of documents that the administration has not released and won't release, and there's now a lawsuit over that. The president won't do that, and that makes him more angry.
You say a number of documents, Mark. Isn't that like in the thousands?
Thousands, yes.
How many thousands and thousands of Epstein documents that the White House continues to cover up. Thousands and thousands of Epstein documents that if you read Regime Change, actually Todd Blanche was at the center of that cover-up and that Situation Room meeting on trying to actually, I would say, break the law that Congress passed to stop from having to release it. So how does, maybe you can explain this to me, because I'm just a simple country lawyer. How is it that Congress passes a law that says the Justice Department has to release all the Epstein files, and they just completely stop releasing the Epstein files?
It's an interesting conversation we have with DOJ and senior officials there. When you ask that very basic question, their answer is, well, we don't have to release these. And they say that they're shielded from privilege. And when you point out, the law actually specifically exempts that.
Congress passed the law.
Right. When you point that out to them, they then just sort of repeat, well, we don't have to release it. So, I mean, taken to its extreme, what you see generally in Trump's mind is his belief that, as he's told the New York Times a number of months ago, that the only check on him is his own morality. I mean, constitutionally speaking, the check on any president is the impeachment and removal process. Trump, having been subject to that twice in his first term, understands that takes 67 votes in the Senate, and it's not going to happen to be removed. So there are times where he's just going to draw a line in the sand and just say, well, make me, force me. And so you're seeing that in a number of these cases. One of the questions that they do have in both the White House and in Congress is, as the continuing resolution to fund the government starts to come up, and as the United States government needs to pay its bills, is the president going to go along with that and help the process? Or is he going to say, well, you're not going to pass the SAVE Act, which I want, or do these other things that I want, and I'm going to basically hold this hostage and essentially have the government shut down? This is during an election year where his party is really sort of on the ropes, as we're about to discuss this polling in Texas, for instance. And the president, so far, and his advisors don't really know what he's going to do. And it creates an incredibly challenging situation.
That was NFL star Travis Kelce earlier this year talking about his now wife, Taylor Swift, and how her drive and success motivate him. Swift is also a rare example of a woman who out-earns her husband. One reason the couple is featured in the new analysis in The Economist, which examines why female breadwinners remain the exception. The Economist found that among dual-income heterosexual couples, just 30% of wives earn more than their husbands. It also found that when women become the primary breadwinners, men are 1.5 times more likely to report serious psychological distress. So why has the male breadwinner model proved so difficult to break? Here to answer is executive editor and New York bureau chief for The Economist, Charlotte Howard. Also here for the conversation, MS Now contributor Huma Abedin, who is vice chair of the Forbes and Know Your Value 3050 Summit. So Charlotte of The Economist, let's dive into this new research. Women now make up 3/5 of American university graduates. So why are 70% of wives still earning less than their husbands?
Well, there's a lot of things I found about this article that were very interesting. But one of the things that I found most fascinating is that the stated preference of Americans is that Americans are very comfortable with women earning more than their husbands. And Americans now, women are more likely to have a college degree. They make a majority of people in the workforce with a university education. And yet that figure remains, that you have just 30% of women out earning their husbands. And so I think what that represents is this gap between America's stated preference, women's acquired skills, and the reality of how women exist at home and in the workplace.
You know, one of the things, aside from the statistic that Mika just mentioned, that men whose wives or female partners earn 1.5%, earn more, are the primary breadwinners, are 1.5% reporting that they have serious psychological distress. That actually goes up, that when women earn 70% of more of the household income, they're even more stressed. And that the findings haven't changed, that from 2001 to 2011, and then 2013 to 2023, it's about the same. So why do you think this is still happening?
I think there are a number of hypotheses I can put forward, but the main thing, and I'd love to know your view of this, is that gender roles are just very, very sticky. You know, people can go to college at a higher rate. We can have all these mentorship programs to keep women in the workplace. But some of these norms are generational. You know, people look at the model that their parents had, and it's a big shift to go from, you know, if you think about a millennial now in the workplace, how their baby boomer parents existed in the home, it's very, very different to see a totally different gender dynamic play out. And you have this self-reinforcing dynamic, I think, that when you have a woman who is earning less, they will take on more household responsibilities. You know, even women who earn more, they have a disproportionate share of household responsibilities. And then that has this effect of perpetuating the idea that women, you know, are consistently earning less because they're taking on more responsibility at home. They can't invest the time that they would if they didn't have those responsibilities at home. So it's just a very, very sticky cycle.
You know, you mentioned mentorship. You mentioned the generational shifts, which I completely agree with. I mean, I take myself as an example that when I was a primary breadwinner in my household, if I didn't have a male partner at home taking on the majority of the household and childcare work, I couldn't have done it. And what this research is showing is exactly what you're underscoring, which is that even when women are the primary breadwinners, they're responsible for the majority of work at home. What do you think it's going to take? Like, what was found in this research that it will take for it to become more acceptable for women's economic power to match the new expectations at home?
I think it's, you know, a combination of things, both wonky and cultural. You know, on the wonky side, you could list a whole number of policies that would make it easier for people to have more support at home and exist in the way they want to in the workplace as well. I also think, candidly, that having men talk about the pride that they take in their women's work and having that be something that is macho rather than undermine their masculinity is really powerful. And so, you know, all credit to Travis Kelce for saying that it's motivating to him. But I think that there are more role models that you probably need to see across different sectors that don't just have to do with your wife being a pop star, where men take real, you know, active pride in their wives' work and are willing to do more at home too.
This has been a long struggle. You can read more about this phenomenon at TheEconomist.com. Executive editor and New York bureau chief at The Economist, Charlotte Howard. Thank you so much for sharing this with us this morning. And Huma Abedin, as always, thank you as well. And coming up on Morning Joe, we'll have a closer look at how the war with Iran is impacting Americans here at home, including the small businesses now being hit hard by the rising cost of fuel. Morning Joe will be right back.
Welcome back. The Washington Post has new reporting on the daughter of Republican Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio filing a new restraining order against her ex-husband, Republican Congressman Max Miller, whom she has accused of domestic violence. Emily Moreno alleges that Miller grabbed one of her attorneys during a hearing on Tuesday and used a profane slur to insult the attorney's fiancé as they were leaving the courtroom. She claims he then continued to goad on the confrontation, yelling, "Come at me," to the attorney. So Miller and Moreno have been engaged in a bitter custody fight and already have restraining orders against one another. Moreno accused Miller in court filings of throwing hot water on her from a pan of eggs he had just cooked in June 2024 on the day she said she planned to leave him. She said it caused her to fall to the floor, and Miller afterwards sprayed her with the sink hose. Moreno has also accused Miller of physically abusing their 2-year-old daughter, who in February suffered a fractured collarbone with, quote, a bruise that accompanies the injury that appears to be in a handprint and appears to have been inflicted, according to a police report. In the same report, Moreno told police that Miller allegedly once held a gun to her head and was physically abusive to her in front of their daughter. Miller has denied all allegations of physical abuse against Moreno and the child and suggested that his ex-wife was fabricating them because she was mentally ill. Now, Senator Bernie Moreno has yet to publicly comment on his daughter's allegations against her ex-husband. Moreno's office released a statement yesterday saying that the senator's top priority is the safety and well-being of his daughter and granddaughter. It continues. While he does not litigate these matters in the media or respond to baseless public attacks, he will do whatever it takes to ensure a just outcome for his family. We'll see if he has more to say in the days ahead. Up next, we're going to bring you a closer look at rising inflation across the nation. Plus, how the impact from rising gas prices due to the war in Iran are hurting the broader economy. Morning Joe will be right back with that and more.